What if I told you that the American story, one of freedom, greatness, and struggle, was built on a line drawn between two colors? Not red and blue, not black and white ink on a constitution, but the actual skin of human beings. This is not just a story about race. This is about how a powerful idea that one color was meant to rule and the other to obey shaped the soul of a nation, from the plantations of Virginia to the rail cars of Jim Crow to the quiet echoes of today's divided streets. This story was written in laws, in blood, and in silence. But today, we break that silence. We go back deep into the roots of racial division in America, where it began, how it was justified, and why it still lingers. This is not a history lesson. This is a mirror, and what we'll see may change everything. In the early colonies, slavery didn't begin as a war between black and white. At first, both African and European indentured servants worked side by side. Some even rebelled together against the ruling elite, but that unity was dangerous. And so a system was born not just of labor, but of division. Skin color became more than just appearance. It became a weapon, a label, a line that separated who could own land and who could be owned. White servants became free men. Black servants became property. This was not evolution, it was engineering. The American color line was not discovered. It was designed. By the late 1600s, religion no longer protected enslaved people. Laws were passed declaring that even Christianized Africans could still be slaves. No amount of faith could cleanse their skin of its political meaning. Race was now tied to blood, to birth. It was inherited, irrevocable. A black child born in the colonies was born into bondage, while a white child inherited freedom. And so, skin color became more than a difference. It became destiny. America was no longer just building colonies, it was building a caste. In 1705, Virginia passed the Slave Code's laws that legally defined who was white and who was not. It wasn't just biology, it was bureaucracy. The government drew the color line in ink and enforced it with guns. Only white people could bear arms. Only white people could own slaves. Only white people had full protection under law. The word white wasn't just a color anymore. It was a legal status, a license to dominate. And the word black became synonymous with the opposite: danger, disorder, and subhuman. What happened next was no accident. It was strategy. Divide the poor, elevate one group, demonize the other. White workers were given just enough status to feel superior. Black people were kept in chains. And the elite, the landowners, the true power holders, they stayed in control. Racism was not born from ignorance. It was born from profit. And color was the tool used to carve up a new world where human value came in only two shades. By the 1800s, slavery was no longer just an economic system. It was the engine of America's wealth. Cotton became king, and the hands that picked it were chained. The South built plantations. The North built banks. Europe built empires on American cotton. But none of it moved without the backs of enslaved black men, women, and children. To keep this machine running, slavery had to be more than tolerated. It had to be justified. And so white supremacy became a doctrine, an identity, a culture. In the 19th century, race was no longer just law, it became science. Pseudo-intellectuals published charts, skull measurements, and theories declaring that black people were biologically inferior. These fake sciences weren't just accepted. They were celebrated in universities and courtrooms. Racism put on a lab coat. Slavery now had charts and diagrams to prove its necessity. The goal wasn't truth. It was to comfort the conscience of a nation profiting from cruelty. In cities like New Orleans, Richmond, and Charleston, human beings were bought and sold like cattle. Auctions were advertised in newspapers. Families were torn apart with a single hammer strike. Children were sold away from their mothers. Husbands from wives. Women were examined like livestock. These weren't hidden crimes. They were public, routine, and legal. And across town, white families prayed in churches, sipped tea, and called it civilization. As abolition grew louder in the North, the South doubled down. Race became a line of war. White Southerners were told slavery was their God-given right, and black people were painted as threats to order and purity. The idea of freedom terrified slaveholders, not just because they feared losing labor, but because they feared revenge. And so they used terror first. Whips, chains, patrols, lynchings. Slavery wasn't just about control. It was about fear. And that fear was taught, spread, and enforced for generations. In 1865, the Civil War ended. Slavery was abolished. And for a brief moment, hope flooded the land. Former slaves voted, bought land, built schools, and even held public office. It was a new dawn. But freedom is not just the absence of chains, it's the presence of justice. And in the South, old hatred didn't die. It regrouped. The color line wasn't erased. It was redrawn. This time not with whips, but with laws, guns, and fear. By the late 1800s, Southern lawmakers began passing new laws: poll taxes, literacy tests, separate but equal. These weren't just regulations. They were weapons. A system known as Jim Crow emerged, named after a mocking blackface character. It turned racism into daily routine. From train cars to water fountains, black people were pushed back into a second-class world. It was segregation with a smile. Oppression in a uniform. Racism legalized. Outside the courtroom, there was another court, the mob. Lynchings became a tool of terror. Public events, sometimes photographed, sometimes celebrated. Thousands of black men, women, and even children were murdered, not for crimes, but for existing in defiance of the color line, looking at a white woman, owning land, speaking too boldly. These weren't just murders, they were messages. Messages written in fire and rope to keep fear alive and freedom at bay. Yet through the violence and the laws, black Americans fought back with dignity, with intellect, with faith. They built towns, started newspapers, formed colleges, created music that would define a nation's soul. In the darkest of hours, black excellence rose not in spite of the system, but in resistance to it. And though they were segregated, they were never silent. The world saw black Americans not only surviving, but creating beauty in the shadow of hate. By the mid-20th century, the pain had boiled over. From Montgomery to Memphis, Selma to Washington, black Americans marched not just for justice, but for their full humanity. Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, the Little Rock Nine, they were not just leaders, they were lights in the darkness. They faced dogs, fire hoses, bombs, and bullets. Yet they walked with dignity, sang with strength, spoke with thunder. America stood at a crossroads: continue the lie of division, or finally, live its truth. In 1964 and 1965, the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act were passed. Segregation was outlawed. The color line on paper was erased. But a line drawn in the heart cannot be undone by ink.white flight, mass incarceration, economic redlining. School inequality all emerged in the decades after. Old systems found new shapes. The signs came down, but the structures remained. The color line didn't vanish. It simply adapted. Now, in the 21st century, some say we live in a post-racial world. But look closer. Black neighborhoods still face underfunded schools. Police encounters still end in tragedy. Job applications with ethnic names still get fewer calls. It is no longer just laws or chains. It's the quiet shadow that still shapes opportunity, safety, and dignity. The color line today is more invisible, but no less real. This is not just a story about black and white. It's a story about power and the choice to use it to divide or to unite. The truth is, the color line hurts us all. It steals empathy. It poisons justice. It limits what this country, what we could become. But the color line is only one line. What about the lines between rich and poor? Between gay and straight? Between what we call beautiful and what we label ugly? Discrimination wears many faces. A child bullied for being different. A mother denied dignity because of her accent. A couple judged for who they love. Let's stop this. This world was not made just for the white, the rich, the powerful, or the popular. This world was made for all of us. No matter your skin, your gender, your background, your language, let us walk together, not as black or white, not as privileged or oppressed, but as one people. One human story, one future worth sharing. And if this message touched you, if you believe this truth deserves to rise above the noise, support this channel, subscribe, share it with someone you love. Because together, we rise.